Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Sandy.
And this is the Italian American Stories podcast. So we're going local today.
Yeah.
Yep, we are leaving Louisiana and headed back to Colorado. We spent a lot of time in Louisiana.
That we did.
We did. But we are not just going Colorado local, we're going Grand Junction local. And that's where Mom and I live, obviously, is Grand Junction.
Yeah, this sounds like a good story, too.
Yeah. And so Grand Junction is 4 hours west of Denver. And, we're a bigger town now, but it's just kind of fun to research the Italian American history in the Grand Junction area because it's actually pretty rich considering how small of a town it was back in the day.
Of Italians,
right. Yeah. The rich history of Italian Americans. Because, the majority of them were in like Pueblo or Denver, which is where our family was.
Right.
But the more I dive into the Grand Junction Italian American history, I'm kind of shocked. So it'll be fun. And we've done a couple. We've done Nunzio Grasso and the Marasco family.
Yeah, I forgot about the Marascos.
Yep. And so today we're going to dive into the story of Amore Raso. And he was this is kind of funny. He was a grocery store owner in Grand Junction.
Well, can't seem to get away from that.
We may be leaving Louisiana, but we're still talking about grocery stores. But I just kind of want to talk a little bit about the Grand Junction history, Italian American history. So the majority of Italians that settled in the Grand Junction area were from Calabria. And interestingly, when many of them first came to America, they didn't come straight to Colorado. They would travel north to even up to into Canada, so like Montana, and they would work on ranches and the railroads before they found themselves in Grand Junction or the Grand Valley area. And a lot of times the Grand Junction area, you'll hear it referred to as the Grand Valley. So it's called the Grand Valley because we are literally surrounded by mountains. I mean, there's parts in the Junction area where you could reach out and touch the mountains, it seems like.
Yeah, between the Grand Mesa and the Book Cliffs.
And then there's even the monument on the west side. Yeah. And so then Grand Junction is just literally sits in a valley between all of these mountains. So, but most of the immigrants, they came to Grand Junction through working on the railroad, and most of them had aspirations of owning their own land and recreating a community similar to what they had in Italy, which, that's pretty much any Italian immigrant, whether they came to Grand Junction or not. So,
right.
So the first neighborhood for Italian Americans in Grand Junction popped up around the rail yard. And I know I have a little giggle in my voice, but that's because it took me. And a lot of the children of these first immigrants would later talk about how they felt so safe and loved.
Yeah, that's pretty neat that they were all from that same area.
It is.
And kind of stayed together from anywhere they went in America.
Exactly. Yeah. They almost followed the same traction of going up north and then coming back down into Junction. So not only the children felt this way, but a lot of the Italians felt that way. They just really enjoyed the landscape of Grand Junction and the small community that they recreated. So
yeah, I could see that. Feeling safe, people.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, they also enjoyed the landscape and the small town feel of Grand Junction. And right now, even Junction has a small town feel a little bit compared to other cities, I guess you could say. But back then, it was really small town.
Right.
If you could even call Grand Junction a town at that time.
Oh, I'm sure.
So
it was pretty small when I moved here in 80 compared to what it is now.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, Mom had a little bit of a culture shock coming from Denver to Junction. Right. She's like, where's the mall? Wait, there's still dirt roads here? But so in a lot of ways, it reminded these Italian immigrants of Calabria with the orchards and the farming that was popping up in the area. But also because of the lack of development in Grand Junction compared to larger cities back east or even in Denver, this really allowed the Italians in Grand Junction to prosper in different ways from the Italian immigrants that settled in large cities. So I read a research paper and they talked about how the Italian immigrants, they could help develop infrastructure, farms, or businesses right along with everybody else. Where, going into New York City, a lot of that infrastructure was already there.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, just take the Grasso, Nunzio Grasso.
Yeah, he helped build a lot of our famous buildings here in Grand Junction. So we're going to talk about one of the more prominent Italians that settled in the Grand Junction area. And like I said earlier, that's Amore Raso. So Amore was born on April 25th, 1885 in Calabria, Italy. And his parents were Antonio Raso and Felicia Stranges.
Oh, so that's the other grocery store, Strange's grocery store down on like 2nd and Ute.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a famous grocery store that's still, the building is still here in Grand Junction.
Right.
And it was Carl Stranges started it. And he was from Italy. I'm assuming the last name got changed at some point.
Yeah, unless
because that's a different name. But Nunzio built the grocery store. And right now it's kind of, somebody has bought it and they're doing a great job trying to restore it and keep the Italian aspect of it. But there's a lot
several issues have popped up.
Several issues have popped up with the city, and so I feel for the person that's bought it. Hopefully,
so do I.
Something can come of it. Amore, he came to America in 1899 when he was 14, and he came here alone, but immediately headed to Montana to meet his older brother who was working on a ranch there. After staying in Montana for a while, he decided to go to work for the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad, and this is what actually brought him to Grand Junction, Colorado. His first job with the railroad was as a water boy, and he then worked his way up to the coal chute foreman. And while doing all of this, really hard, laborious work, Amore never forgot that his dream was to open up his own business, particularly a grocery store. In 1904, Amore was able to secure a lease at the train depot to open up a store in the train station. It was probably cheaper for him to lease something out at the train station than to have a whole building.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But also in 1904, he went back to Calabria to marry Rafaelina Paula, and she went by Lena, so we'll call her Lena from here on out. And they were married on December 12th, 1904. They came back to Grand Junction after the wedding, and the couple, they would go on to have 4 children, Dora, Roland, Amos, and Dante. So when the couple got back to Grand Junction, Amore started running his store, but he was also still working for the railroad. His goal was to save up enough money to buy his own store.
His own plot.
Yeah, exactly. His own plot or building. But during this time, he was also working really hard at making a name for himself in the Italian colony in Grand Junction and really just kind of becoming a leader of the Italian colony in Junction.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So in 1909, Amore, along with 2 other Italian men, Nicola Caruso and Carl Stranges, they bought a building for $50,000, which is about $1.7 million today, in order to open up an Italian club / foundation for Italian immigrants.
Wow.
I know.
50,000 in 1909?
1909. And I would love to know where this is located. I had a lot of trouble figuring it out. So the store that he owned in the train station, I don't think that was very profitable. It was probably not as big as he wanted it to be either.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because in 1912, he bought a building at 202 South Colorado Avenue and opened up a full grocery store where the family could also live there as well. And so the building that he bought, it was actually already a grocery store. And Albert Sada, he was a Greek man. He owned the grocery store and he just sold everything to Amore. So, Amore got the shelving, basically the infrastructure to run a grocery store.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, so it made it probably a little bit easier for him. And by 1914, Amore's business had grown so much that he actually ended up buying another building in order to expand his grocery store and have a larger grocery store.
Wow, he is moving up.
He is. He's doing really well. And this time he just bought the land and started building his own 2-story white brick building for the grocery store. And it was funny because it said in the paper that no other building would look like this one in Grand Junction. So the paper, they think the community was even anticipating like, oh my gosh, what is this new building going to look like?
I'm sure that was exciting.
Yeah. The paper, like I said, they did seem excited because Amore, not only was he building this cool building, but he promised that he would have many more imported goods from his native Italy. So it sounds like people... not just the Italians were like, hey, when are you going to get more of this food from Italy? And so that was his big promise was, well, when I build this store, I can bring in more goods from Italy.
Oh, wow.
I know. I was kind of shocked about that too.
That's pretty neat.
It is, huh?
That people would do that out of the Italian community.
And so Nunzio Grasso, who we've talked about, he was actually awarded the contract for constructing the basement of the building and then doing the final brickwork for the exterior of the building.
He did a lot of work. All those Grassos did. They were all kind of in brick mason.
They were, yep. So, and the store, it formally opened in July of 1914, and it was described as being one of the most modern buildings in Grand Junction.
Wow.
Yeah. And besides being a business owner, Amore, he was becoming very involved in the community. He would volunteer with the police department as an interpreter for Italian Americans. And he also was raising police dogs. I saw that in a couple of articles. And so I don't know if he was raising I don't know if they were just German Shepherds and they referred to them as police dogs, or if he was actually helping to raise dogs for the police force in Grand Junction. Training, yes.
Oh,
So I'm not sure, but they were always referred to as police dogs. Huh. And we'll get into a situation that happens later on with one of his dogs. And again, it was referred to as a police dog. So kind of interesting. And he also started to buy a lot of property throughout the Grand Junction area. He would just kind of buy empty lots or, a small house here and there and just started accumulating property. But he still had a really strong connection to Italy. And in 1915, Amore, he started to tell the Grand Junction area that they needed to get ready for a large influx of Italian immigrants that would be coming to the Grand Junction area. And this was due to a massive earthquake that happened in Italy that same year. Amore, he kind of knew this because he was receiving letters from friends and families claiming that they were leaving Italy because of the destruction.
And he was probably inviting them to come here.
Exactly.
Wow.
Because there was so much work between the railroad, the farming, and the orchards and stuff. So
right, and he's buying up all this property. So
yeah, he's like, you guys can live here,
can help them out,
pay me rent and stuff. Yep. And because of this, the earthquake in Italy, it also caused the price on imported goods to rise, which caused Amore some trouble. He had to cut back on some of the goods for his grocery store. And honestly, this would continue for the next few years because then World War I happened.
Oh,
briefly
well,
after
that
this.
makes sense.
Yeah. Amore, he actually spoke with a reporter with the Daily Sentinel on February 27th, 1917. And he was telling the reporter about the tragic state of Italy during the World War I. And he knew this because he'd received a letter from his father. And, his father obviously was still living in Italy. And Amore's father's main complaint was how bad the food situation had gotten in Italy. He said food was really expensive and just basically hard to come by. And his father also told him how all the young men were serving in the war. And they were becoming so desperate for more men that they were drafting men in their 50s.
Whoa.
Yeah. And you also have to think about a lot of Italian men had come to America by this point too. So
that's true.
And there were even a lot of Italians in the Grand Junction area that had not yet gained their citizenship. They were worried that they would be called back to Italy to serve. So they were pretty desperate for people.
Yeah.
And so 1918, it was an interesting year for Amore. Their home was broken into and they had a few valuables and one gun stolen. And a couple of months after this, a man walked into Amore's grocery store and pointed a gun at Amore. But he wasn't demanding money. He was actually demanding that Amore sell flour. Just flour, not any flour substitutes. And so I don't know if this is because, we're still in World War I here. If there's a food shortage and so maybe Amore can't get his hands on flour and so he's buying different substitutes for flour, but to come in and demand that, not demand money, just demand that you start selling flour.
How's he supposed to get it if
Exactly. It's like, I'm sure he would if he could. And so Amore, he jumps over the counter and overpowers the man and took the gun back. And when Amore took the gun back, he quickly realized that this was his gun, the one that was stolen a couple of months prior from his house.
Well, this guy's after him.
He is. He had a whole plan. And so this story kind of jumps around a little bit and there'll be gaps in time just because I couldn't find a whole lot on the Rasos during certain periods of their lives, and then they would show up a lot in the newspapers. So
yeah, that's okay. Skimming through their life.
Exactly. Yeah. And so one of the things that the Rasos did a lot was they entertained at their home. So they would have local judges, attorneys, and other prominent citizens to their home where they would always cook them Italian dinners. And even in the local newspapers, it would be described as, quote, they are having a genuine Italian dinner, or, quote, the Italian dinner will be supervised by the Rasos.
Sure is very elegant too.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I bet it was. And so in 1922, the Grand Junction area was thrilled when Amore became the sole agent for importing Sasso olive oil to the area. So apparently the Junction area was having trouble getting olive oil. And so Amore had applied to be the local agent and was approved by this company in Italy. And he would receive 10 cases a month from the company.
Oh, wow.
So,
that's smart.
Yeah. And this was such a big deal that it was even in the newspaper, how the community was so excited about this. Like the non-Italians in Grand Junction really apparently enjoyed the Italian food.
Right. Hopefully that was enough to go around.
I know, because you think 10 cases a month.
Right.
Yeah, that doesn't, I mean, I don't know how many bottles are in a case, but still.
Right.
So Amore, he would continue to purchase property around the Junction area, and, you know, he would continue to have these little houses built on the property, and he would either sell the houses or rent them out. And later on, his granddaughter, Amore Raso, she talked about how her grandfather loved buying property. She said that he was basically obsessed with acquiring land. And her quote is, "Land was the thing, to an extreme, actually. He liked it so much, he did not want his kids to sell it when he died."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the other thing he loved purchasing was vehicles. I would see announcements in the paper about how he would have vehicles delivered to him, maybe like every 3 years.
Wow.
That's pretty cool.
Shipped to him?
Shipped to him, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I guess there wasn't any dealerships here.
Fucos weren't around, I guess, yet. Yeah. And so what he loved to do is when new Italian immigrants would come to the area, he would take them for a ride around the valley in his car, kind of showing off like, here's your new home.
Yeah.
And he also
was proud.
He was proud, exactly. And the other thing he liked to do was he liked to get his friends in his car and drive out to the desert to shoot at targets, which is still fairly popular in the Grand Junction area. And in the summer, he would load up a bunch of food in his car and head out to Canna Creek with friends and families for picnics.
Yeah.
So in 1926, Amore, his son, and one of his son's friends, they were on a drive over Dallas Divide when their car plunged over the cliff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I've heard of Dallas Divide. I've probably been over it, but I don't know.
You've been over it several times.
I've been over it several times.
It's on the way out of Ridgeway. On the way up to Telluride.
Okay, yes, I've been over
where
that.
we always stopped and took all the pictures of the San Juans.
Okay,
in the fall.
Is that where all the elk always were too?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Dallas Divide.
Okay, yes. So I have been over that bazillion
Several
times. Yeah. Actually, when I was writing this, I kept thinking, I'm like, I know Dallas Divide, but I was like, I'll just let Mom explain it.
Well, we probably didn't call it Dallas Divide, you know.
True.
It's just we're going up to the San Juans.
To the San Juans,
right.
Exactly. And the San Juans, they're a beautiful mountain range.
Right, yeah.
In more southern Colorado, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Southwest
Colorado.
One of the prettiest mountain ranges I feel.
Oh, me too. It's beautiful. And then there's the little town Uray down there. And
right. Yeah, we spent a lot of time there.
A lot of time there. Yep. It's a gorgeous area. They call it Uray is like little Switzerland.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that's surrounded by the San Juans. So, but yeah, driving the Dallas Divide, that could be a little scary, especially in 1926 when road infrastructure was probably not what it is today. It might have even been dirt road at that time.
Oh, I'm sure it was. This is 26.
26. Yeah, that's crazy. So it sounds like what happened what caused him to go over the cliff was Amore and the boys, they were driving down Dallas Divide when a speeding car came up behind them. And the car tried to pass them, and that's when Amore's car was forced off the road and plunged down the side of a cliff, basically.
And that's a high mountain range, too.
Even now, there's some sketchy parts where it's like, oh, gosh, you could see this happening. And so their car flipped and landed on the roof. But the Amore and the boys, they were okay, and they were able to crawl out of the car. And so another car with two attorneys driving in it, they specified this a lot in the newspaper that it was two attorneys. They came along and helped Amore and the boys. And this is the part that kind of makes me laugh. Together, they decided to chase down the speeding car and get get the guys. And so they caught up with the car at a gas station, and, they were able to call the police, and the police came, but I'm not really sure ultimately what happened, but at least everybody was okay. And so, like I was saying earlier, there's these large gaps in the life story of Amore. So the next part that we're going to talk about happens in 1934. So we're going from 26 to 34, which is an 8-year span. But before we get to the event that happened in 1934, I kind of want to add in some important background information on Amore and how he really started to advocate for the Grand Junction community. He wanted to see it grow and prosper, and he knew that the area had a lot of potential. So he really started investing in hydropower plants and different types of infrastructure around the area that would really help Grand Junction in the future.
Oh, wow.
How cool is that?
Yeah, he was very knowledgeable.
One of the big ones that he invested in was the DeBeck hydro plant. And so DeBeck is just, 30 miles, 40 miles east of us.
Yeah, maybe 20.
Just a small little town. And, he continued to be a true leader in the Italian community as well. Not only did he have his club that he started that would help Italian immigrants settle into the area, he was also known as the guy who would loan Italian immigrants money.
Oh, that's good.
So, and I'm sure that was hard for them, when they first got here to get a loan from a bank. So
yeah, any credit of any sort.
Any credit, yeah. His granddaughter in the paper that I read, she talked about how there was probably not one. It was either his granddaughter or his nephew. I can't remember. There was probably not one Italian immigrant that didn't owe money to Amore at some time. But they went on to really emphasize this was nothing like Blackhand, though. It was just a genuine loan, not like, okay, I'm going to loan you this, but you have to give me.
Right.
It was just, he was genuinely wanting to see them have a good start in America. And I also read where he was extremely polite. His granddaughter said that he would always tip his hat to new people that he met, and he always tipped his hat to a lady when he passed her on the street. I thought that was nice. So cute. So, of course, though, there were those that didn't care for Amore, and the KKK, it did develop in this area and have quite an influence, sadly. And Amore, he had a cross burnt at his grocery store one night.
Wow.
Yeah. And so when it came to the Italian immigrants in the Grand Junction area, they kind of just seemed to target the Italian businesses. They just did not want them running any sort of business in the area. So, and sadly, that was kind of the downfall. And I don't want to get off on too far of a tangent, but that was kind of the downfall of our little Italy in Grand Junction was the KKK.
Wow. Probably because they were the most prominent immigrant from any place.
Exactly. And they were doing so well. They were owning grocery stores. Look at Amore. He's investing in the future of Junction and
becoming involved in society, in the community, and probably politics of some sort.
Exactly. And actually, it's funny you say the politics part. His son Amos, he graduated law school, ran for district attorney. Oh, wow. Was very into politics. So, but yeah, so like I said, the KKK, it was kind of the downfall of the Little Italy and the Junction area, because a lot of them, they found it so hard to run their businesses, they just left and went to Denver. So
yeah, that's sad.
I know, it makes me so mad. There was a few families obviously who stayed and endured through it. But let's go ahead and get back to 1934. So in the Daily Sentinel, which is the local newspaper here, an article dated July 26, 1934, it was reported that the Italian consul and his wife were scheduled to visit Grand Junction and be the honored guests of Amore and his wife.
Wow.
How amazing is that?
Wow, what a recognition.
Exactly. So I had a lot of trouble finding their actual names. Their names were never in the paper. It just said the Count and Countess of San Marzano. So I Googled it, and I probably could have looked a little bit more. But the Count and Countess of San Marzano, they had just been appointed by the King of Italy prior that year, and they were appointed to represent Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, and Utah.
Oh, wow.
Pretty cool, huh?
Nice.
And so while they were in Grand Junction, they visited the Italian American Club, they gave speeches, and they spoke with a lot of the Italian community. And Amore also took them for a car ride, of course, around the valley. So I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah.
And like I said, couldn't find their names, but still, what an honor for Amore and his family. Right. I think you even said that. What an honor.
Right. great recognition for him.
It just shows how prominent he was
Right.
too. So, but do you remember earlier how I was talking about Amore raising the police dogs?
Yeah.
I found another article, and this one's sad. I'm a pretty big dog lover, so these kind of things kill me. One of his dogs was poisoned and died in February of 1935. And it sounds like there was a string of dog poisonings in the area.
Wow.
I know. And so Amore, he offered $25, which is $580 today, as a reward for information on who was doing this.
I wonder if it was just in the Italian community.
I was wondering that same thing too. I actually looked in the newspapers to see if I could find any other articles on these dog poisonings, but I couldn't find anything. But it does make me wonder.
Right. Go back to the
Cross burning and
Right.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Exactly. And Amore, he even said in this article that his children were robbed of their best friend.
Oh.
And the dog was described as the big friendly giant of their little neighborhood.
Oh, that's
so
sad.
I know. But in 1938, Amore, he actually converted his grocery store into a liquor store. And I'm not sure the reasoning behind this. I don't know if maybe Amore just needed a change, or maybe the area was becoming too saturated with grocery stores. Maybe he was getting older, but yeah,
Or it could have been more profitable.
that's true. That's a really good point. It could have been more profitable. Maybe that was lacking in the area.
Right.
So, and also in 1938, Amore and his son Amos, they made a trip back to Calabria where Amore was born.
Oh.
So I bet that was a pretty special
Yeah.
trip. Yeah.
I bet it was.
But before they went to Calabria, they spent time sightseeing in northern Italy. So they went to Rome, Florence, and Milan. They also spent time in Naples with a friend of theirs who was described in the paper as being a millionaire because he
Wow.
owned a seed importing business, or exporting business. So
Wow.
yeah. And it's funny because Amore and Amos, they actually met this man in Grand Junction. They didn't meet him in Italy because the man had visited the Grand Junction area where he was trying to convince the Grand Junction Seed Company to buy his seeds.
Oh.
How cool
well,
is
that?
that?
Makes it even... That's way cool.
It's really neat,
Yeah.
to meet in little Grand Junction.
Right.
So they spent some time visiting with him. And after Naples, they went to Calabria where they were united with friends and family. And Amos commented that the area where his father was born, it had tons of vineyards and orchards. And he said he was amazed at how well they used every area of the land, especially compared to the vast west of America where they were now living.
Oh, yeah.
And so
The wide open ranges.
The wide open ranges, yeah. And the one thing that Amore and Amos also commented on was the difference in the freedoms between America and Italy. So for Amos, he was born and raised in America. That's just what he knew. But Amore, he had the perspective of living in Italy and then coming to America. And so they just really commented on how different that was. Keep in mind, this is also 1938 and war is looming in Europe. It's getting ready to explode with World War II. And so Amos said when he was explaining to his Italian relatives what America was like and the different freedoms that we had, they would just look at him in a polite way like he was telling them a fairy tale. And so he said it was just, they couldn't even really wrap their head around it. And he contributed this to, obviously, it's southern Italy, but their news source was extremely limited, especially in the South.
Sense.
Yeah. So they were unaware of a lot of events and the different types of cultures.
Right.
He even said that electricity in the South at this time was not available 24 hours a day. The electricity would be turned on and they would only have their news source for a limited time. So, and it was very controlled as well.
Oh.
Overall, the two loved visiting the south of Italy and spending time with their friends and family. And so for the next 10 years, Amore and his family, they continued to flourish. His son, Amos, graduated from law school. Like we talked about earlier, he became a district attorney in the Grand Junction area. His middle son, Roland, he graduated from medical school and was a well-known doctor in the area, especially the Palisade area.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And his youngest son, Dante, graduated from the University of Colorado, and he owned a lot of businesses in the Grand Junction area. His daughter, Dora, she graduated college and she became a teacher in Quebec for a while until she was married. She married a Pantuso, And if you
wow.
yeah, if you are a Grand Junction listener, that is a very well-known name in
Yes,
the Grand Junction area. So they actually still have a restaurant here, Pantuso's restaurant. But back in this time, they also owned a shoe store. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. After, she was married and they had kids, she was a housewife and she loved sewing, gardening, and her and her mom would do different charity events together. And so in March of 1948, Amore and his wife, they were in California visiting family, and he fell ill somehow. It didn't necessarily say how, but it was enough to where Roland, his son, who was also the doctor, went and got him and took him to Denver. But he took him to Denver and he stayed at St. Joseph's until he was well enough to make the trip back to Grand Junction. And so Mom and I just giggled because St. Joseph's was...
That's Grandpa's only hospital.
Yeah, so Mom's dad, he wouldn't go nowhere else other than St. Joseph's. But he did seem to recover fairly well and made it back to the Grand Junction area until November of 1948 when he was taken to St. Mary's Hospital due to an illness. The papers reported that he was in critical condition, and sadly, Amore, he did pass away from heart disease on November 12th, 1948 at the age of 63.
Oh.
And so his death, of course, was a shock to his family, but also to the community members who had grown to love and respect Amore. He had so many investments and business partners and people that just truly respected him.
Oh, I'm sure.
And so I'm not sure who put this statement out in the newspaper. I don't think that it was a family member and it's anonymous, but I do want to read it because considering the fact that it's not from a family member, it's really cool. And so this was just a few days after his death. And the headline says, "Made his dream come true." The life story of Amore Raso typifies the life of many an immigrant boy who came to the land of promise with no capital save his industry, honesty, and ingenuity, and used those qualifications to make the promises of the new land materialize, to attain the position of a respected and successful American, able to give his family opportunities he himself was denied. Unlike too many of his fellow compatriots, Mr. Raso came west and likely found avenues open to him that would not have been so easily traversed had he remained in the crowded East. Through Amore Raso's influence and his experience, other Italians were drawn to our area, and to these he had, through the years, been a wise counselor and big brother. By these, Amore Raso will be sorely missed, and he will be by many others of our community who recognized him as a loyal and progressive citizen.
Oh, how nice.
Isn't that really nice? Like I said, I would bet money that that's not written by a family member. So pretty cool that they recognized him.
Somebody really respected him.
Exactly, to put that in the paper.
Well, I think he was very well respected.
I do too, yeah. Amore's funeral, it was held the following Sunday at St. Joseph's Church in Grand Junction. But interestingly, though, Amore was buried in Denver at Fairmount Cemetery. So I was kind of shocked by that he wasn't buried here in Grand Junction. And when his wife Lena passes away, she's buried there as well. So I don't know if maybe
other maybe previous relatives
exactly
were buried there, or people owned the plots
and they wanted to be buried together. Right. So after his death, the paper reported that Amore's estate was worth about $100,000, which is roughly around $1.3 million today. And the property, all of the property that was owned by Amore, it was divided between his wife and his 4 kids, but with the stipulation that they were not to sell any of the property. He really did not want that property to be sold. Eventually, though, probably the grandkids, they did sell the property. And there is even a Raso subdivision in the Grand Valley. It's in the Palisade area, which is just right in the Grand Valley, right next to Grand Junction. And so I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
I haven't either until I started doing this research on the family. So Lena, she did pass away on March 29th, 1973 at St. Mary's Hospital, and she was 88 years old. So she lived for about 30 years longer than Amore, because she passed away in 73 and he passed away in 48.
Yeah, so 25, something like
close
that.
to 30,
30,
yeah. But the Raso name it's still very prominent in the area. There's actually our downtown area, and I'll post a picture of this. There's one of the buildings that he acquired, and it says the Raso building.
I remember that, yeah.
Yep, I think 1912 or something like that, but it's really cool. It still has his name on it, and yeah, so That's our story of Amore Raso. Definitely a different type of story than our Axeman one.
Right. It was very uplifting.
It was, yeah, just a good story about an Italian immigrant who really made his way in America and his children were very successful and happy lives. And and like I said earlier, it was good to get back to our local Colorado Grand Junction area. And what I would like to do stories on his kids and grandkids as well in the future. We're not going to do them back to back like we did the Axeman ones, but we'll sprinkle them in our episodes every once in a while. You know, like I said, his one son was into politics in the local area. One was a doctor. And so we'll definitely do that. And I'll post pictures of the family and the buildings, but also I found a lot of pictures of various ads for Amore's grocery store, liquor store that we'll post too, because some of them were pretty cool. I think I was texting you.
You did. That was fun reading those. Yeah. There's,
stuff about olive oil, stuff about beer, and they were just really cool ads. So we'll post those as well. But we hope you enjoyed listening to the story of Amore Raso, and we hope you come back to listen to more stories about Italian Americans. See you next time.